I think she's a little busy right now at work. Uh, so, yeah, we got a pretty good showing already. I think we can start.
Whenever
Okay.
you're ready.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and today I'm just sort of starting from the middle of it. And this first little clip I'm going to show is a conversation with an ex-Rhodesian who now lives in Kfar Saba in Israel. And she's just going to talk a little bit here.
Could you describe me Bulawayo while you were growing? Bulawayo, which you remember from your childhood?
I think we had a very privileged upbringing in Bulawayo. We had 4 African employees in our house. That's how I grew up. I had a nanny. When I think of it now, it's really weird to me because I would get up in the morning. No, let's rephrase. I would wake up in the morning and my nanny would come upstairs with a tray and she would serve me breakfast in bed. Not only me and my sister, we shared a room. And we would have breakfast in bed. Our school uniforms would be placed at the end of our beds. We just didn't have to think of anything. We were totally, utterly cared for.
Could you please tell me what were the political views in your home and also your personal, that time many years ago in Africa?
Well, the best thing in the world was my nanny. What would I do without my nanny? It so happens that my nanny, whose name was Sarah had a child the same year that I was born. His name was Clement, and I'm sorry to say it, but it was the way things were. When African children were born, they stayed with their mothers a very short time, and then they were sent back to their, let's say, their ancestral homes. Their homes which were out in the, I don't know how you translate Bundu, outlying areas, let's say outlying areas, and the children were sent to the grandparents to be raised in an African village. And then every weekend or every second weekend, my nanny would go and visit her children. But the main thing is that she would be sending money for their upkeep and education. And I cannot recall my parents ever discriminating between blacks and whites. But of course it existed. I think because in later years my father dealt very specifically with the African trade, and he learned to speak many of the African languages. For instance, Sindebele was the language spoken in Bulawayo. My father would speak Sindebele. He had a wonderful driver who was really his right-hand man. Certainly I remember him coming over to our house and he would sit with us in our lounge. Or I don't ever remember feeling that there was such a big difference. But I was young. And I did know that Africans lived in townships and they weren't my neighbors. I do not recall anywhere in Bulawayo where there would be a park bench that said only white people could sit on it. It may have been, I don't know, but I don't ever remember seeing anything like that. Whereas one of the first things that I recall seeing when I came to live in South Africa was exactly that. They had benches there that said whites only and non-whites only. It meant white people couldn't sit on non-white benches and non-whites couldn't sit on white benches. The same went for public transport. But I never felt it in Rhodesia, and certainly my parents I never ever heard a derogatory word said about black people. So I was brought up, I would say, in a very open home about so many things, very luckily. No, I never heard anything like that. No, I never got any political input from my parents that I can recall. Maybe my brothers, because they were a bit older, might say something different, but I don't ever remember having a political discussion or even thinking black and white. The only thing I know is that my nanny made the most wonderful food. It was called sadza. Sadza was like a thick porridge that she would make meat and gravy to go with this, and I used to go and sit with her in what was known as a kaya, which is the housing that my parents provided for her on our property, and I would go and sit in her room, and I would squat on the floor because that's how she would be sitting, and I would take the sadza, this thick porridge in my hand, and you mold it with your hand like this and make it into a bowl, and then you dip it in the gravy and you eat it, and there can be nothing more delicious in the world than sadza, which is a maize porridge. Sadza, gravy, and meat. Yes, that's wonderful. I love it. And I don't know why we didn't eat it, because it was great food, but I had to go to the kaya to eat that kind of food. So, no, just didn't feel anything between black and white people, but I'm sure it existed. It existed. I just personally didn't feel it. And really only learned about segregation when I came to live in Johannesburg, as I said, when I was just before I turned 20. And that was the first time I knew that there was a very big difference, and that it was a law that white people could not live with black people could not live with white people in a next door neighbor kind of thing, because obviously your servants that you employed, albeit they were paid servants, although paid a dreadful sum of money, they could stay in your house, but they would need special permission to be in the house, and they were not allowed to have African visitors to the house. Only the people who were registered to you, and I'm talking about South Africa now, could be in your house. Weird, but that's how apartheid really was there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do we have any comments? Especially interested in any comments from our ex-Zimbabweans here. Sunette, do you know what? I don't know if Sunette is on or not, but Sunette had very similar stories about her nanny. You know, especially the breakfast in bed part, and getting,
Yes.
and getting the crusts of the toast, cut off, and then the Marmite had to be spread, just very evenly over the toast. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if Denise is there as well, but
Oh, Denise
yeah.
is muted. Oh, Denise, could you unmute yourself so we can hear you?
Maybe she doesn't want. I don't know.
Oh, no.
But
Now we can hear you, Denise.
Oh, you can hear me? Yeah, that woman's like, she's speaking a bit naively, because we were always aware of the differences. We were aware that Africans had it much worse than we did. And there was segregation in Rhodesia, because I remember, like, if you went to the public park and you wanted to go to the washroom, there were black washrooms and white washrooms. You never saw blacks in your washroom. So there definitely was segregation there.
But they didn't have signs. It was just understood, right?
No,
they actually have signs.
There were signs. I mean, it's fuzzy because it's so long ago, but there had to have been demarcations. There were definitely demarcations, because you wouldn't just see blacks and whites mingling in the public washroom.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to come to something a little bit later on what happened in Sharon School, with the two little black children who came to, and what a big deal it was. And they're discussing in the newspaper about the de facto segregation that was in Salisbury, even though it wasn't declared. I guess it was a little bit different. It wasn't like Jim Crow or like South Africa, like Jim Crow in the American South or South Africa, where they actually had, laws on the books. It was just understood that you really couldn't mix and you weren't allowed, And,
I think there were laws, like I'm going to
Oh.
research it, but not as harsh. And there were definitely laws about where Africans could live, like the tribal trust lands were farmland set aside for them. So there was some kind of legal thing, just not as severe as apartheid. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And his sons are the same thing as Mealy Meal?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's grits, basically. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a little bit like Mama Lega, is it? Or like Romanian Mama Lega?
We don't know what that is. So.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it is. It's like a cornmeal porridge, but they
Okay.
usually make it very stiff. They don't make it so liquidy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you can get that in a restaurant around here.
And a lot of whites did speak in a very derogatory way about the blacks. There were bad names. It wasn't all sunshine like she made out.
No.
Okay.
I just
No.
like to say, she didn't seem to be aware, but I'm sure that the black people in that country were aware of the difference.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'd like to hear them interviewed.
Yeah.
Except that they're worse off now, actually. But,
here's an interesting, no, I don't want to cut you off, Sunette. Did you want to say anything
No.
else? Or Denise?
No.
Yeah, and here's a little interesting old film clip. What do you call them? What they used to show in the movie theaters, newsreel from 1960. And it kind of speaks for itself.
This is Movietone. Jeffrey Sumner reporting. London Airport and the start of another royal tour. The Queen was there to see her mother off on a 6,000-mile flight by BOAC Britannia to Salisbury. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother's tour of the Rhodesias and Nyasaland was planned to last 3 weeks. And perhaps the most notable engagement of her visit would be the official opening of the Great Kariba Dam. In view of recent violence in the Copperbelt area of northern Rhodesia, special precautions are being taken, of course. But no changes in the program of the tour had as yet been announced. All good wishes went with the royal traveller for a successful and enjoyable trip. Salisbury's wet weather had given way to brilliant sunshine in time for the Queen Mother's arrival. The Governor-General, Lord Dalhousie, led the official welcome and made the presentations to Her Majesty. The Guard of Honour was found by the 1st Battalion, the Royal Rhodesia Regiment. A big popular welcome was in store on the drive from the airport to the federal capital. Apart from the ceremonial escort, troops and police were conspicuous by their absence. Salisbury, in fact, had turned out in full force to give the Queen Mother the friendliest of greetings all the way. Crowds in the streets were estimated to number 60,000, probably the biggest ever seen here. The people had waited hours just to see her drive past. It was an auspicious beginning to the tour, with everyone cheering the royal visitor as she now stopped for the civic reception at the city centre. Built
I
by...
could be mistaken, but I think they drove right by Sunette's father's pharmacy. And that it looked like that street. I don't know.
Yes. You very good observation.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And any comments, Denise or Sunette? Sorry, I'm picking on you, but you're the ex-Rhodesians here, so.
No,
Is Sunette there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Sunette?
Okay, thanks. I'm actually at work. I'm starting work in like 15 minutes, but
Oh, okay.
I just want to be here.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I
my
have
sister.
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
I don't know what part of Africa these two entertainers were from, but I met them and I performed with them. These two entertainers from Africa I think it was the late 1960s or early 70s. One of them, and I met them at A&M Records on La Brea Avenue in Hollywood. And that A&M Records had belonged to that was Herb Alpert's record company, Herb Alpert. In any
Oh,
event, one was one, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but one artist
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
yeah. What's going on?
Nothing. You continue. I was trying to move on to the next slide, but instead of that, it tried to repeat the present one.
Okay,
You go ahead.
so the one artist was Hugh Masekela, a trumpet player. Hugh Masekela.
Oh, yeah, he's very famous.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you know
he's
that.
South
And
African.
and the other was a woman by the name of Miriam Makeba. She was a singer.
Oh, he's well known.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because I don't know of any way other that I can contribute to this, but that's all I have.
South African, right? Is it
Yeah,
Yes,
they're
they're from
South
South.
African and
Dave?
very well known. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen? Steve?
Yes.
It's Bill.
Hi, Bill.
Bill. Hi, Bill.
How you doing? I wanted to ask you a question about the people from South Africa. I was told by a South African that the black people were called Kafirs. Have you
That's
ever
right.
heard that expression,
Oh, yeah.
Kafir?
Yeah. That's actually derived from Arabic,
Yeah.
which is heretic in Arabic. And they
Oh,
call them kafirs.
Right.
But it's very derogatory.
It
It's
is.
like the N-word.
It's like calling somebody by the N-word.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very
Oh, I see.
yeah.
So
I had there were three people on our yeshuv in Israel, in our settlement, that were from South Africa, and they had moved to Israel in the 80s. And they had some interesting stories.
Yeah. And they're, of course, and I haven't really touched on them. There's a big community of South Africans in Israel. A lot of them did end up where they were very Zionistic and very Jewish oriented and kind of very on the ball that way. And yeah. No, I encountered a lot of South Africans in the Israeli army.
Yeah.
There are a fair number of Americans in the Israeli army. There are also a fair number of South Africans.
Well, some that I met, Steve, had come to Israel because they didn't like the fact that Mandela was probably going to be taking, they didn't like that part. So
Yeah. And Sunette worked in South Africa too before and she went to a university and I guess Denise did too, the
Yes,
University
I
of
did.
Cape Town.
Yeah.
The one of the musicians that had played at the temple with me, Malik Al Kabir, he's from West Africa.
Oh,
West Africa. And
no,
so,
he's very good. I can vouch for that. Yeah, he's the guy who was at the Brother John's, right? He plays sax.
yes, and then I brought him
Yeah.
to the temple with me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's really
I
good.
don't think you were there for a bagel breakfast. He was.
Hmm.
He actually played with me there on 3 different occasions at the temple, but unfortunately you were working.
Oh, now here's another newsreel that sort of kind of speaks for itself. This is from a few years later. 1965.
For 2 days, negotiations aboard HMS Tiger held the interest of the whole world. The Prime Minister's colleagues included the Attorney General, Sir Elwyn Jones, and recently back from Rhodesia, the Commonwealth Secretary, Mr. Herbert Bowden. Also on board was Sir Humphrey Gibbs, the Governor of Rhodesia. Ian Smith had accepted the final chance to negotiate a settlement. While they were all on HMS Tiger, there was still a restrained but justified optimism that Rhodesia would agree to the Prime Minister's 6 principles. Back in London, at Lancaster House, Mr. Wilson met the delegates of the EFTA countries. Ian Smith had not replied, though an answer was required by 10 o'clock that morning. While talks went on about Britain's approach to the common market, undoubtedly Rhodesia was uppermost in the minds of many present. Behind Ian Smith's request for a few hours' grace, did it mean he was pleading with colleagues to accept the British conditions, or was it a stiffening of resistance? Finally, the answer, no. That night, Parliament had its most dramatic session for 10 years. To the United Nations Security Council went Foreign Secretary George Brown. On his last visit, he said this:
The British government would be prepared to join in sponsoring in the Security Council before the end of this year a resolution providing for effective and selective mandatory economic sanctions against Rhodesia, would withdraw all previous proposals for a constitutional settlement, and in particular would not be prepared to submit to the British Parliament any settlement which involved independence before majority rule.
In the Security Council, the voice of the United Nations will be heard. May it be the voice of peace.
Yeah. And of course, this is a historical backdrop over which the lives of a lot of families, including Sunet's family, changed. Things changed a lot. This was the, we touched on a little bit, it was the unilateral Declaration of Independence of a white-only government that nobody except Ian Smith and his friends approved of. And well, any comments from anybody who wanna unmute themselves? Denise or
South Africa approved of it as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
They
just
were in
these
there.
two. Oh,
Yeah.
not too surprisingly, I guess.
No.
You know.
No.
And that, of course, led to a civil war, which was pretty horrible, and culminated in the state of Zimbabwe in 1980. And we had shown some clips. So last time, the tearing down the statue of Cecil Rhodes in Salisbury. Do you remember that? Do any of you remember that? No, I mean like Denise or Sunet remember actually seeing it. Or
We weren't living there anymore, Sunet and I. We were in South Africa.
oh, okay. And so we have next. I'm going to go next. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Now this is kind of interesting. I have a couple of. Well, this is a photograph of Sharon School, which was a Jewish day school that Sunet and her sisters attended. Sunet is actually in this picture, but she's hidden, unfortunately, behind somebody's big head and hat. Maybe here. We figured that out, right, Sunet? And this is, well, what year would this have been, Sunet? And is this the entire student body, or is this just like a few classes. I know it was a small school. Or can you?
The whole school.
That's the whole.
And it grew slowly, like it started with grade 1 and went up. So this could be possibly before it had all the different classes.
Yeah, there were only about 5 grades. It was 1965. It started in 61.
Okay, okay. Just sort of grew gradually. Got it. Yeah. And at the time, and as you know, Denise was saying, you know, there was de facto or even prescribed segregation for the most part. And it was a very big deal when they admitted 2 African children to the school. And I've just, the printing there is a little too small to see. So I'm going to read some articles. The articles are sort of interesting from a historical standpoint, okay? And this is from January 1963, Daily News. Now, I don't know if Daily News appears to have a very definite political slant, you know. I don't know if this reflected, you know, this may have been like a very liberal newspaper or something. But anyway, they say a brave move. No better news could have come out of the federal and Southern Rhodesian capital than that of the admission of the Wakatama children to a European school. The news is as heartening for us all as it is timely for Mr. R.A. Butler. I don't know who is R.A. Butler, the governor of Rhodesia, or don't know?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Salisbury, the capital of a federal state constituted on a policy of partnership, and I'm guessing partnership is integration maybe, is the most notorious in the enforcement of discriminatory practices. That it is in this city that the Wakatama children have been enrolled in a formerly all-white school is news that takes a lot of believing. It has happened because the Board of Governors of the Sharon Hebrew School have not been influenced by color considerations in making up their decision. Their decision is the more welcome insofar as it will show Mr. Butler that in this federation it takes not an English school, but one that is Jewish, to put the policy of partnership into practice. Had it not been for the generosity of the Jewish community, Mr. Wakatama, a lecturer at a British-run university and a university college of which Her Majesty the Queen Mother is Chancellor, would have had the difficulty in the indignity of sending his young children daily to Harare or Highfield. And I'm guessing Harare at that time was like a black township.
Yes.
Maybe. Okay, and so these were not just 2 random black children. These were the children of a black university professor. All because the English schools near his English-run university college would not lower their standards, in quotes, by admitting 2 black-faced children. It is too early yet to gauge what the implications of this historic development will be. At this stage, we can only wait and hope that no pressure will be brought to bear on the Sharon School. In addition, it would be greatly appreciated if other privately run schools in Salisbury and elsewhere in the country emulated this admirable example. If a concerted move was taken by these schools to rid themselves of the devilish color consciousness, they would put to shame any other institutions, educational or otherwise, still wedded to the concept of racial segregation. It is happy coincidence that as the Wakatama children were being enrolled at the Sharon School, 3 other African children were similarly registering at the all-white St. Joseph's School in Kwekwe. If the European children, obviously with the approval of their parents at Sharon and St. Joseph's schools, are happy to learn side by side with children of other races, there is no reason why this pattern should not be repeated everywhere. It was unfortunately that side by side with the good story of the Wakatama children, in our weekend edition, we had that of Mr. J. Dayalji, an Asian bitterly bitten by the segregationist policy of the city council. Only a few weeks ago, we praised the residents of Highlands for welcoming an African family amongst them. If an expensive suburb such as Highlands does not suffer property depreciation by the presence of an African family, what reason is there other than that of racial prejudice to stop Mr. Dialji settling at Southerton? With the good example set up by Sharon and St. Joseph's schools, we urge Salisbury City Council not to bar Mr. Dialji from taking occupation of a house at Southerton. The City Council must not succumb to the influence of the select few among its members who are doing nothing but damaging the good names of both this country and its capital. And here's a little bit more about these children. Okay, it says 2 African children, a boy and a girl, have broken Southern Rhodesia's traditional school segregation by enrolling and attending classes at a formerly all-white school in the heart of Salisbury. Gladys, age 9, and Snowy, in parentheses 7, children of Mr. Matthew Wakatama, lecturer at the University College of Rhodesia in Nyasaland, have become the first Rhodesian-born African children to enroll and enter an all-white school since the federal and Southern Rhodesia government amended their respective education acts last year to allow private schools to take in students without regard to race. When I visited Sharon's school this morning, I found Gladys and Snowy playing with other boys and girls. Later, they filed into their respective classes. Mrs. Vera Totis, school principal, said the 2 children were settling very well in the school. She said, what is interesting is that the other boys and girls accepted them completely from the first day. There has not been the slightest signs of resentment by them. She said both Gladys and Snowy were doing very well in class as well as in other school activities. Gladys had been placed in Standard 1, which I guess like first grade, and Snowy is working KG1, kindergarten. Both are doing remarkably well. In fact, they are as good as any other student. Gladys is finding it a little difficult in catching up with others in Greek, but there is no doubt that she will make it, added Mrs. Totis. Okay, in all towns. The chairman of the board of directors of Sharon School, Mr. H.H. Goller, said the decision to integrate the school had been taken by the full board, which represents Jewish communities in all towns of Southern Rhodesia. From now on, admission will be decided on merit regardless of race. But like any church school, preference will be given in children of the Jewish faith. Okay, so very, interesting article and, historically significant. And, any comments from our ex-Rhodesians here on, did you know these kids?
Yes, I've told you we knew them.
Yeah, okay, well, tell me.
It was a very small school. You
them.
couldn't, they weren't, he was in first grade. There was no kindergarten. She was in 3rd grade. But, and Snowy is still on the Facebook page of Sharon's school. He lives in Atlanta. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so he lives in Atlanta now. He did tell us that Gladys had died. So, and then they learned all the Jewish education as well. And Snowy was given the Hebrew name Sheleg, which means snow in Hebrew.
Appropriately, but very unique as a Hebrew name. Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh,
yes.
Go ahead, please.
Well, 2 questions. Were other than Jewish students enrolled in the school, and were Jewish students allowed to enroll in other schools?
Most Jewish kids did not go to Sharon School. It's like most people don't send their kids to a Jewish day school. So most of them went to the regular school, and it only started in 1961. So everybody before that had gone, and they were almost all Jews. There was one non-Jewish girl in my class. I'm not sure why her parents enrolled her, Sandra Bowler. And then later there was an Indian who also was enrolled. Now the Sharon School is still in existence, but they don't think there are any Jewish students there at all.
There are a few. There are about 3, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And
because the entire Jewish community of Rhodesia is now about 100 people, mostly senior citizens, right? Yeah.
Right.
So I have a terrible story about the Wakatamas.
Oh, go ahead.
Their mother drove quite a nice car. And the one time when she went to pick up her kids from school, one of my mother's friends was so impressed to see this black nanny that could drive and could pick up the kids. And she went up to her and she said, "Whose nanny are you?"
Oh
And
my.
she was a university lecturer's wife, and I think pretty educated herself.
What did she reply? What did she say back?
I
Did she-
don't know.
It may not be printable.
Yes.
No, I'm sure she had to be polite because
Oh, yeah, she could have gotten in trouble if she would have said something like "kiss my black ass" or something like that.
yeah, would have been jailed. Yes.
It was a little bit like Jim Crow South. Yeah,
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah,
A lot.
and I think they were only there a couple of years. I don't know how long they stayed there. I think they moved out of the country or something.
Yeah, I don't think they finished.
But
Well,
yeah,
it's
but
amazing.
interesting.
I just want to interject this. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
go.
My family settled in Seattle, Washington, which is, as you all know, a very liberal area, and the state of Washington has always been very. So I grew up in a neighborhood with Jews of all backgrounds, Black, we called them Negroes at the time, African American people, Chinese, Hawaiian, Japanese, all before World War II. Of course, World War II changed all that. But I'm interested in this because I have friends who came to Seattle in 1949 from South Africa because of already then things were happening there, and he couldn't maintain his life. And his children had contacted malaria.
Oh.
So he wanted them out of Africa, literally out of Africa. So, but I have family, I think, from my father somewhere in South Africa. And I don't know if anybody is ever going to come into this conversation that knows any of my family, the name being Mayo, M-A-Y-O or M-A-I-O. Interesting.
Mayos from Zimbabwe, from Rhodesia.
Well, my family never settled in Africa. They were all in the island of Rhodes, and
Right.
my father came to this country when he was 2 years old from the island.
Oh, I see. But
And
they
they
could
also, yeah.
other Mayos that came to Zimbabwe.
Well, yeah, he had a cousin named Leon Mayo who left Rhodes before the war, I guess, because he got out. He was like 15. And I know he lived there many years because he came to Seattle once. I never met him because I moved to Arizona in 1963. So I've been here a long time.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Just, I wonder if the Mayos of Mayo Clinic have any
No.
connection. They're definitely going.
My father and his brother were the Mayo brothers, but they were grocers, sadly. They did all right. They did fine, but they were not. I don't think the name Mayo, it was De Mayo, being Sephardic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess there's quite a Sephardic population. There was at one time in South Africa.
Do you know what? I had an Italian internist once named De Maio,
Yeah.
who was Catholic.
Probably could be
Catholic,
could have been a
but I don't know what his
converso
roots
also.
were.
Yeah, they could have been conversos.
He was a nice guy. He was probably a Jew in his roots. Yeah.
So all of this segregation business always is sad. But last night watching a convention here gave me a lot of hope for this country. So because there was so many women and so many women of color. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for the comments, keep them coming,
course,
please,
of
okay?
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is Sharon School, first class. So this is, and this shows it was a small school. That's an ideally small classroom, okay?
Oh, boy, yeah.
With a very good looking teacher. I don't remember my first grade teacher looking like that. And so Sharon School, any comments about this picture or anybody?
Yeah, she's the one that was mentioned when they said the principal, Mrs. Todis.
Oh, Mrs. Todis. Mrs.
Yeah.
Todis? So this
Yeah.
is Mrs. Todis here.
Right.
Yeah, Jessica
Yeah.
Todis's mother, the wife of Dr. Jeff Todis.
Okay, yeah, because I remember that last name Todis, yeah, and you mentioning that. Okay, so, and Dr. Jeff Todis, what about, could just remind me about him?
No, he was just a GP.
Oh, okay.
But Jessica was in my class.
Oh, and Jessica was in your class.
And
Was
she
he your
lives in
family
Sweden
GP?
now.
Dr. Todis? Was he your GP?
No, it was Dr. Friedlander.
Oh, right. Here, this is another picture, Sharon School. Tu B'Shvat, any comments on this?
That's the first grade, and this is Tu B'Shvat, yeah, it's 1961. I have to answer the phone.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Yeah, go ahead. And those are like probably mothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And here you are, Denise.
Oh.
And that's 1970.
Right.
Yeah. Any comments on the picture? Or
Where's Denise?
I am on, that one. With the ponytails, pigtails, I don't know what you call them. Me.
extreme left of the picture there, sitting. Okay,
Right.
where my
Yeah.
cursor is.
I see it.
Yeah. No comment. I think this was our final year of school.
So what grade would have that been? American grade?
It's called grade 5. And after that, we went to high school.
Mm.
And there was no Jewish high school, so we all went to public schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how was that experience? The public school?
It was mind-blowing. It was so different.
Oh boy.
The people were so, it was such a mixed bag of people compared to this kind of elitist, like almost everyone at the school was wealthy and a bit snobbish or whatever. And then you suddenly go and there's this whole other world of people. I was really happy to leave. And in fact, I wanted to leave earlier. And my father was on the board of governors of the school, and he was president of the shul. And he said it would not look good, and there was no way. It wasn't like now where they'd send you to a school psychologist or something. So,
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Steve,
Yes, sir.
thank you very, very much. It was very interesting. But
Oh,
unfortunately,
thank
I have to leave the program at this time. So I would bid you thank you very much, and everybody have a very nice day. Thank you.
Yeah.
Same to you.
Michael. Yeah, we'll
Thank
be seeing you, Michael. Okay.
Yes. And you
Now-
take care of yourself, Steve. Thank you.
Oh, I will try to.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is a sister-in-law who couldn't make it. She's in Israel. She's in near Tel Aviv, Greater Tel Aviv. This is Claire right here, right? I've got my finger. And she is like very much front and center here. Does this have anything with her being head girl?
it could be. I don't know.
Could you explain about head girl for people who don't know? Because that's a very British thing, I think.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So you have prefects, like in the final year or a senior year or whatever, you have prefects who enforce some rules and have some kind of sway over the kids, and the head girl is the most senior one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you run like class meetings or something, or you just kind of?
No, but like at recess, you can boss people around, start fighting, that kind of thing. So not really. I mean, in high school, the head girl and the prefects did have, like they had a special study, and they had like quite a lot of authority. Like a special study room, I should say. Like, so.
How old are the children in this? What ages are they? How old were you there?
I'll have to work out how old she was here. I'll work it out for you.
1973. Yeah.
I have a question, Steve.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what languages did you speak besides English when you were in Rhodesia?
That is a question for the Rhodesians. Yeah, not.
Oh, exactly. We never learned African languages, and they weren't offered at school. It's the same. Well, it was the same in South Africa. There was no interest. There wasn't thought to be any necessity or anything. But a lot of people who lived on farms learned African languages and learned to communicate with their workers. And during that civil war, it proved very useful in the army because they could understand what the blacks were saying. They could infiltrate certain things. But in our time, the languages were inferior, so there would be no reason to learn them. They had to learn our language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was Shona?
Shona in Salisbury. Okay. And a woman said Ndebele in Bulawayo. And she said her father actually learned to speak it, which is quite unusual.
Now here's a question I have about the Civil War. Okay, were they the guerrilla armies that were they totally raging? Were they, was it totally against civilians? Was it totally a terrorist war? Did they have any encounters with Rhodesian armies?
They had it wasn't. It was a military war as well. They had a lot of military battles and warfare and all that kind of thing, and they were armed by the Russians in part. So it wasn't like just civil disobedience kind of thing. It went much further than that.
No, it just what I've, the little bit I've read about it, that there are things about just butchering missionaries and white farmers, and like it sounded like a terrorist action, primarily. Zanu and Zapu.
No, there was at one time when boys turned 17, there was compulsory military call-up. They weren't allowed to leave the country or anything like that. And all the guys I knew were in the army, all the white guys I knew.
I have another question, Steve.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I read a book years ago called Something of Value, which was about the Tutsi, uprising and so on. Are there any books that you would recommend to read about this particular period of time?
There was one from last time that I showed.
Mukiwa, Steve.
I'm sorry?
There's one that Steve showed last time called Mukiwa, a white boy in Africa. It's very, very typical of our life. And I think he also joined the army, so you get that whole aspect of it.
Okay, I was at the dentist last week, so I missed that class.
Oh, yeah. But Steve, does Sunette own that book?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a copy. I think it was originally your copy, Denise.
Can you
Oh.
spell
Your
it?
name in it.
Can you spell it for me?
Yeah. Mukiwa.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm afraid I'm taking it with me to Yuma to read. No. Yeah, I'm starting to read it myself because it is interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
you can lend it to me when you get back, Steve. I've been lending you books, so you can lend me one.
And the guy's mother was a physician and the medical examiner because it was very remote. So she kind of did everything, apparently, which is also very unusual. This is more pictures from the bat mitzvah of Sunat. And any comments? And it just, what was it? So it was at the Sephardi
Steve?
synagogue that they had this? This looks
Yeah,
Sephardi.
they had it at the Sephardi one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Somebody is calling my
Steve?
name. Yes.
Steve, it's Bill.
Yes, Bill.
It's Bill, Steve. That movie that was made, Something of Value, it starred Sidney Poitier, and it was very interesting. It was based on a true stories. There was a group of people called the Mau Maus. They were guerrillas in Africa at that time, and it was a horrifying story. Some of the servants living in people's homes had become Mau Maus, and they were trusted servants. And what they did, they murdered the people that they worked for. It was a horrendous type of era in Africa, the Mau Maus. Just want to mention it.
But I would read the book. The book is just, it's a real classic. I highly, highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's in Kenya. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was it. And there was a lot of course, there was a lot of unrest all over Africa because none of these subjugated tribes were very happy with what all these colonial powers were doing with them, without even by your leave, kind of. Oh, any comments about the bat mitzvah here, or the pictures, or what's because here it's got a little more information about it. 13 girls, Sunat mentioned that. Yeah, all of them present pupils or graduates of Sharon School took part in.
Yeah, I have to go now, Steve.
Oh, okay.
But there were 13 of
Okay.
us because girls didn't read from the Torah. It was like a joint Benot Mitzvah ceremony.
Yeah.
And the 13 of us, we read from like the Book of Ruth or something like that. And then 2 of them were chosen to give speeches. One gave in Hebrew and one gave in English. And it was like on a Sunday, I believe.
Yeah. And I should add that, the level of Hebrew teaching in Sunet's school was nothing like the level of teaching in my Hebrew school, or most of us had in Hebrew school. I mean, went to Hebrew school, pretty minimal preparation for me to be in Israel afterwards. And in Sunet's school, this Sharon School, they studied pretty seriously, and they became pretty fluent in Israel. So yeah, I remember South Africans, also South Americans, same thing. They also had some pretty serious study in their Jewish day schools.
Sunat, if you're still there, was your bat mitzvah on Friday night, like they did for us in the olden days? We couldn't have it on Saturday.
No, it was on a Sunday.
But it wasn't Saturday like the boys.
It wasn't Saturday. No. It was basically an Orthodox synagogue.
Yeah.
So it was really Orthodox practice. And Orthodox, sometimes they have something they call bat mitzvah, but then they have to sort of do a lot of workarounds because, of course, the girl can't be on the bima. She can't be reading from the Torah. She can't, Debbie had a bat mitzvah at a Orthodox synagogue. The rabbi was a Chabadnik, and and it was done during the week, and he called it an exercise, so that's how he got around it. But he let Debbie be on the bima, and she was leading a service, but it was sort of a demonstration service. It wasn't an official service. So And I wanted to talk, this is some interesting aspects of, life and what was Rhodesia. The kids, the Jewish kids were often part of youth movements. Sunette and her sisters were in Habonim, which, as it explains here, it was actually sort of a socialist Zionist in concept. And there was also Beitar, which was, on the opposite end of the political spectrum. That was a revisionist Zionist. That's kind of right wing. So Habonim were more into like camping and fun things, and Beitar were more into like spiffy uniforms and saluting. I guess that's just my prejudice about Beitar. Actually, I was for a very short time I was a member of Beitar. How did that happen? That was in Israel. I was planning to go into the Israeli army, and I wanted to go with people I knew, and there was an arrangement. You can go through your youth movement and be in something called Nahal and be with people you know. And a friend of mine whose name was Moshe Halperin was also interested in going into Nahal. It was my class, and he found out about this group, Beitar group, and I said, that's not really where I am, politically. And he said, nobody cares, it's not important, politics doesn't matter, but turns out it does. And they threw us out because we were, serious about it. And ultimately I was in youth movement prior to army that was similar, I guess, to Habonim. That was also socialist. It was sort of aligned with a labor government in Israel. It was called Hanor HaOved V'Halomed, which is working and studying youth. But yeah, Denise, could you tell us anything about Habonim or your experience in Habonim? Sunette wasn't very enthusiastic about Habonim, is my understanding.
I wasn't either. But what happened actually, which was interesting, is people joined because their friends joined a certain movement. So a lot of the people you see in that Beitar photo are Sephardim.
Interesting.
Right. So
okay.
It became a split kind of thing.
So the Sephardim kind of ended up being in Beitar.
So yeah, so we wouldn't have joined Beitar, but a lot of those people in the picture are Sephardim.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing from the family names that they
From
are.
the names, exactly. Yeah.
Almele, I see, and I see Hanan. Gala is kind of small.
Almele, Kodron, yeah.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. So yeah, and Habonim, so that wasn't fun specifically for you either. I mean, I was an enthusiastic scout myself. I wasn't really into camping and outdoors, but is that what they were trying to do? You would like camp outside and stuff?
They had proper camps that you went to, like you have in America for kids, when you camping in that sense. And they tried to build like some feeling for Judaism and Israel and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Okay, now let me see what I have here recorded. It's another interview.
I think we mixed in the Jewish community, which was at that stage, and I stand corrected, the Bulawayo Hebrew congregation was the Orthodox synagogue, and there was a Reform synagogue, and I think the population may have numbered 6,000. I really stand corrected about that, but it was a very close community. My father worked on the Chevra Kadisha, which is the Jewish Burial Society. He was not a religious man, but all his expression of Judaism and how he felt about it was expressed in his privilege to bury the dead. He felt it was always his privilege to sit with a body at night, because when a Jewish person dies, they are not left alone. There is always somebody sitting with the body until it's buried, which may have a reason why we bury our dead so quickly. And he used to sit with a body at night, and this gave him a lot of comfort. We used to go to synagogue with my mother on the Sabbath and on Jewish holidays. I can so clearly see my mother now wearing gloves. We also wore gloves to synagogue, and of course we would dress very nicely. I loved going to synagogue. I'm very happy to say that even though I met Larry in Johannesburg, we came back to Bulawayo and were married in the Bulawayo, what is called the Bulawayo Jewish Congregation. I have a book here, and it was called the Bulawayo Hebrew Congregation, which gives the whole story of the synagogue in Bulawayo, which unfortunately was burned down with suspected arson. I don't know if it was ever proven that the synagogue was burned down through arson, although I am 99% sure that was the cause. And I, at that stage, still had a cousin in Bulawayo who was very much a part of saving this synagogue, or what was left, and getting the books out of the synagogue in time, and the Torah, or more than one Torah. And we were all heartbroken when the synagogue was burnt down, because it truly symbolized the end of Jewish life in Bulawayo. The numbers diminished very quickly, and at this moment in time, I believe there are certainly not more than 60 Jews left in Bulawayo from a very thriving community, and they are all probably in the old age home there, although I can think of a few people my age who still go in and out of Bulawayo because they still have business interests there. But the wonderful thing about Bulawayo is that I still have so many friends from there who I stay in touch with around the world.
Okay. Oh, any comments, Denise? Sorry, I'm picking on you.
Oh, no, nothing about that, no.
Yeah. Okay. Can we continue a bit more, or do we want to?
I'm fine.
Okay. Here. How many have we? We still got all our membership here. Okay. Let me see what I have next. Next up here. Whoop. No, that's what we just saw. Here we go. Oh yeah, and she was talking about the Bulawayo Synagogue. So here it is. That's a picture. And it's got a mikveh next to it too. The ritual bath. I guess I have a little bit of an interview here.
Can you describe a little bit about the Bulawayo Hebrew congregation? What did it look like?
Glorious to me. When it's the burning of the shul was a total tragedy. It's not completely burned down. It's a shell. There's a shell remaining, and it's used now. It doesn't have a roof. It's used now by a tabernacle community who meets there. So the spirituality is still somewhat there, but the shul was European in style. It was the shul, and across the road from the shul was what we called the Guild Hall, which was a kind of ramshackle one-story building. But when I see pictures of it now, but when I was there growing up, it was where we did our plays, and we had bar mitzvahs there, and wedding receptions, and there were classrooms there. So it was a very vibrant community. We had Hebrew teachers hired to teach us in the afternoon. Then, as the community developed and the need arose, we built a new, a multi-story building, 4 stories, I think, next to the shul. And that was for the Jewish kindergarten. And the rooms above, I think, were for Cheder, and then on 2 levels. And then on the top floor was for the Jewish youth movements. We were all very, if you wanted to have a social life in the Jewish scene, you belonged to a youth movement. And I belonged to Habonim, which for me was the best. But there was also Beitar and Bnei Akiva eventually. And that was, through that we learned Israeli dancing, we learned Israeli songs, we went to camps locally during our school holidays. There was a Jewish club, didn't mention that. There were 2 Jewish clubs, one in town and one out of town in the country. And at that country one, we had a camp, which was, talk about rough. I mean, nowadays you take a cot and you put your sleeping bag on the cot. We had tarpaulins that we put on the floor, on the ground, and put our sleeping bag on top of that. We pitched our tents ourselves and took them down ourselves. We dug the toilets ourselves. You know, it was wonderful fun. We had a lot of fun. And these camps not only served as a social gathering for Bulawayo Jewish kids, but also the other town, Salisbury. We would mix. They would come to us and we would go to them for other functions. And then in all the tiny little towns, there would be a smattering of a Jewish community here and there. Their kids would come. So there was strong affiliation from my perspective in Habonim. I know Beitar had the same. And there was rivalry, you know. You Beitar, that kind of, you're Habonim. So we were very much, we celebrated Yom HaAtzmaut, we celebrated Yom HaShoah. We were vibrant. And in some ways, I must say, the Jewish communities were ghettoized. We kind of lived close to each other, not on top of each other, but close to each other. My mother was very involved in the shul. My father was involved in the shul. My mother was involved in community work, Zionist work. She never went back to medical studies. She never went. The only studying that she did in Bulawayo was to learn English and to do typing, shorthand and typing in those days. But she never worked. My father, and then I'll get back to the shul. Later on, again, as the community developed, there was a need for an old age home, and my mother and father were founders on the founding board and committee of this old age home. And in fact, it's that home now that has become the center of what's left of the community in Bulawayo. It's where they have their services, and if you want to be kosher, you do it through them, and it's kind of like the last vestige of a Jewish community in Rhodesia, in Zimbabwe, not just Bulawayo, in the whole country. And there are old people there.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Any comments or questions?
There's still old Jewish people in Harare as well. Like, it's not just
Mhm.
like she said.
Yeah,
There are
yeah.
still
And-
Jewish
and-
people in
and-
Harare.
And actually, Dave Bloom met up with an elderly gentleman named Benny Leon
Right.
and did a very interesting video
Right.
that I showed last time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Benny Leon from Rhodes, whose family was from Rhodes also. So yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to stop here because, you know, our time is kind of up and I'm hoping to continue this maybe on a Sunday. You know, we'll have to work out a time because I won't be able to do Thursdays because I'll be working. But thank you all for coming. Anybody who wants to unmute himself and say anything, please.
Steve, all the very best in Yuma. Stay safe.
thank you.
Be careful, please.
These
were wonderful.
Thank you so much for doing this, and have a safe and wonderful experience. And we'll hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, in these times with Zoom and everything over the internet, I'm not really going away because I intend to continue to participate in Torah study. You know, I don't see why I wouldn't be able to make that if it continues to be done by Zoom, you know, and, you know, oh yeah, and I'll be watching the services too.
By the way, Denise, it was very nice meeting you.
Thank
you, Steve.
Yeah, oh, yeah, and I want to thank Denise for her insights and her comments. They really added a lot, you know. So,
oh, you're welcome.
and you know, because yeah, Sunette talks about it a little bit, you know, not a lot.
I
So,
remember more than she does. I don't know why, but I remember a lot more than she does.
About that, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Marty's going. Okay. Yeah, you're muted, Marilyn. If you're saying something, you're muted.
No, I'm muted. No, I'm not muted.
Oh, the other Marilyn.
The other Marilyn.
Oh, the other Marilyn.
Marilyn Israel is muted.
All right, can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you. Yes.
All right, I just wanted to thank you and wish you well and stay safe.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
everyone. But what I love about this is that I realize no matter what, as a Jew, you are united with people all over the world.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, goodbye, everybody. Yeah, I'm gonna close
Bye.
this up.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.